Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another Healthy Minds live stream. Give me 1 second here to pull up my slides. Healthy Minds live. Sorry if you hear a little bit of echo there. I forgot to mute myself before I started talking. For some reason, when you start live streaming from YouTube, it just really likes to put, like play your own sound to you, which kind of just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but here we are. All right. Here are those slides. And here we go. So this week, we're talking about getting through a short-term crisis. So I'm not talking about, when I say getting through a crisis, in this situation, I'm not talking about, a long-term strategy for managing something huge. More like when you're having a particularly difficult day, you're really just having a hard time kind of getting a handle on yourself, getting a handle on your emotions, and you need some tips to just help you get through the day and get through the moment. That's what we're talking about today. So these strategies are very effective for helping you get through difficult moments, things like panic attacks, things like, something huge has just happened and the emotions are just through the roof, really heightened, and you can't get a handle on it. You can't get a grip. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about today. If you only use these coping skills and you don't use some other coping skills that are more kind of longer term strategies, like some of the other things we've been talking about in other live streams so far this semester and will continue to do, it's not going to be that effective. So these are short-term strategies and shouldn't be considered kind of the only tools in your arsenal. All right. As usual, I want to mention really quickly, my name is Dr. Angela Eno. I am hosting this live stream series, provided as part of a collaboration between several different entities on Utah State University's campus. Those entities all kind of came together to create my position as the embedded psychologist in the College of Education and Human Services at USU. So those entities that are part of this collaboration are Counseling and Psychological Services, the College of Education and Human Services, and the School of Graduate Studies. So in addition to these live streams, another piece of what my position is here for, and a pretty big piece of it, frankly, is to provide counseling that's specifically tailored to the needs of graduate students in the College of Education and Human Services. So if you are a graduate student in the College of Education and Human Services, or if you know somebody who may be in need of individual therapy, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to provide some therapy. So one other quick note, speaking of the topic of therapy, is that this workshop is psychoeducational in nature. It's to share some skills that may be useful to you, but it is by no means intended to take the place of mental health care. So if you are someone you know is in need of help, I really highly recommend that you reach out to a qualified therapist and get some one-on-one care. All right, all of that said, let's get started. So the first set of skills that I want to teach you is a set of skills that are summarized by the name the STOP skill. And by the way, this comes from a type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. This was created by Marsha Linehan and originally created for people with what's called borderline personality disorder. And it turns out this stuff is just super useful, in my opinion, to basically anybody in a time when you're in a really heightened state of emotion. So these skills are not things that I've come up with. You can find all kinds of information about this stuff online, all kinds of YouTube videos, handouts, all sorts of things. And in fact, this graphic that you see on this slide that I'm sharing here comes from a video where they talk about several of the skills that I'm going to be talking about today. In fact, the majority of the skills I'm going to be talking about today. So if you want to check that out and get a little bit more information, get another perspective, you can click the link at the bottom of this slide that says psychotherapyacademy.org. I also forgot to mention, you can download these slides, and in the next few slides, you'll see the link to download those slides and be able to click that link from here. All right, so stop skill. The beginning of this skill actually is pretty self-explanatory and is exactly what it sounds like. We use the acronym STOP to remember all of the steps to stop skill. And as you might notice on this slide, I've only showed you the first three, and that's because I want to take a second to really explain the third one in a little bit more detail. So stop skill. As you might imagine, the S in STOP stands for stop. And what we mean by this is literally just don't do anything. When we're in a state of extreme emotion, it is not the time to make decisions. It is not the time to run our mouths. It is not the time to take action. It's really the time to pause. And some people find it helpful, in order to remember that, to kind of call up the image of a stop sign. Just remind them to stop where you are. The next thing is take a step back. So this can look like a lot of different things. Sometimes this just means like emotionally disengage a bit. Don't continue a conversation that might have you upset. If you're in a situation that you can leave, it's okay to leave. Maybe you're having a panic attack. Come up with a reason to take a walk outside, to go to the restroom, whatever you need to do. Just take a step back from the situation, whether physically or kind of metaphorically. Now, keep in mind, if this is, for example, during an argument, you need to communicate that you're taking a step back and you're not rejecting the other person you're having this conversation with. You're saying, I need just a second to kind of process, to cool off a bit. I want to come back to this. And if you've said that, then you have to take the responsibility to be the one that comes back. Don't make the other person kind of loop you back in. This actually is a skill that's often discussed in couples therapy as well, as an effective way of managing arguments. So often one member of the couple, and the research on this suggests that if there's a man in the couple, or two men in the couple, men are kind of more quickly reaching this spot of kind of emotional flooding, and often less likely to realize it. Just a little kind of side note there, and something to keep in mind. But if you're part of a couple and you're having this argument, and you're getting to the point where you're beginning to not think clearly, you're feeling like you're going to fly off the handle, you're going to say something you regret. This is one of the things that's highly recommended in couples therapy as well, is to just take a break and own the responsibility to return to that conversation. All right. Anyway, arguments aren't the only time this skill is useful. They're just a time when they often are useful. So, all right, stop, take a step back from the situation in whatever way that means for you, whatever way you can think of. And then the next thing is to observe. I really want to elaborate a little bit more on what observe means and how we do that. Let's talk about what you're observing. A great place to start is the things that's going to be the most noticeable for you in that moment. So what are you thinking? What are you feeling in your body? What does that tell you about what you feel emotionally? What urges are you noticing? Now, it's important. Right now, we're just noticing. We're not acting on those urges. We're noticing the urges. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What urges am I noticing? If you can get the space to sit and write all that out, super helpful. There's a handout in a previous live stream that you could check out. It's the live stream from last week. That's Your Mind Lies to You, all about anxiety and depression. At the very beginning, I present a belief-driven formulation that has kind of everything lined out: bodily sensations, thoughts, actions, emotions, that you could actually print off and have handy to pull out when those moments are happening for you. So check out that live stream on the College of Education and Human Services YouTube channel that you're on now. There's a playlist that's called Healthy Minds Workshops, and you can find that recorded live stream in there if you want to check out that model. Anyway, returning. So what is it that we're observing? What we're thinking, what we're feeling, our bodily sensations, what urges are we having, but we don't act on them. This part is really important. Those are the things that are going to be like right here in your face. They're very, very easy for you to see. Most of us, if not all of us, I might even argue all of us, when we get in a state of heightened emotion like this, frequently we have sort of an emotional and cognitive tunnel vision. We're a bit like a horse running around with blinders. We can only see what's just like right here in front of us. And that emotion is just so big, it's kind of blocking everything out. The thoughts that we're having in that moment, the urges that we're having in that moment, they get so big that they're blocking everything else out. So it's important to know this about yourself and know this about human beings in general. If you've been through therapy, you also might have heard a therapist refer to this as getting into your lizard brain. It's that part of our brain that's reacting on instinct, that's reacting out of emotion. It's not doing a lot of higher level processing. It's not prioritizing. It's not thinking about the bigger picture. It's really focused on that stuff that's just like right here. Okay. Now there's a reason why we do that, and it's actually adaptive. So what many researchers and therapists believe is that the reason we do this is because if you think about it, when we're in a situation where there is a clear and present danger that we might be actually harmed, we don't have the time to break down and analyze every aspect of the situation and decide if our emotions make sense in the moment or if we're kind of acting on reflex. We don't have a time for that higher level, really thinking through kind of stuff that we do. If you think about it this way, let's say you're walking down a dark street and you see somebody approaching you and they seem a little shifty. They seem like maybe they might mean you ill intent. And they're carrying something in their hand that you think it could potentially be a knife, but you're not sure. And they're walking toward you pretty rapidly. And in fact, as you notice, as you're walking, their pace is picking up and they're staring right at you. Okay. It's just not the time for you to stop and say, okay, but they may have other motives. Maybe they don't have a knife. Maybe it's a toy knife. Maybe it's, maybe this person is walking intently for some other reason and they don't mean to stare. Maybe they're lost in thought. No, this isn't the time for us to do that, because if there is a clear and present danger right here to us, we're going to be harmed, right? So we need to act. Right? And so in those situations where there is actually a real danger to us, it's very adaptive for us that our minds kind of take this shortcut and they just kind of let our bodies hijack us and make us act quickly. It shoots us in the foot more often than not, though, because our bodies can't really tell the difference between, I'm just having a fight with my partner that's making me scared because the relationship matters to me, or that's making me feel insulted, but I'm not actually in danger. They're not going to harm me. I'm just getting anxiety. Our body can't tell the difference between that and I'm actually in physical danger right now. I need to escape. The same process is happening in your body either way. Okay. And what that process is a part of your nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system, a branch of that nervous system that happens automatically, kind of like autonomic might suggest. It's the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight, flight, freeze, tend, or befriend response that's happening right there. Okay. Our body's little shortcut, our way of getting ourselves to act quickly and get ourselves out of danger. It is adaptive. It exists for good reason. Don't hate yourself and beat yourself up for the fact that this happens to you. Don't blame other people for why it happens to them. But if you can use that stop skill to stop, take a step back, and observe that that's happening for you without acting on the urge, then you can realize you've got a bit of tunnel vision and take a second to take in the bigger perspective. So let's talk about the bigger perspective. So I've missed a slide here. There we go. This is the slide I was trying to go to. Got my slides a little out of order. Sorry about that. Okay, so we want to look at the bigger perspective. The bigger perspective is, besides these things that are freaking you out, what else is going on? So besides what's happening in your body, besides what's happening in your emotions, in your head, in your thoughts, what else is happening? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What's happening for the other people around you? Can you see their facial expressions? What else can you observe besides that state of panic? Take a step back, see that bigger picture, okay? So just as a recap, we've talked about we're going to stop, we're going to take a step back, we're going to observe. That's our STO. And then our P stands for proceed mindfully. Okay, it's the last little part of that acronym. Proceed mindfully means now that I've taken the moment to take a step back and to observe to the point that I've gotten myself out of that state of tunnel vision, out of that state of panic, out of that state of the emotions are so big, it's all I can see. Now I can make a decision about what I want to do. And I can take into account more than just what I'm feeling. I can take into account my long-term goals. I can take into account my values. I can take into account other people that might matter. I can take into account what's going to be most productive for me in the long term, what's going to pay off for me and what's not. It might take you a while to get there, but that's just fine. It's really important to remind yourself with stop skill. Just stop. You don't have to do anything yet. It's not about doing. Just stop for a second and be. That's what stop skill is all about. The next set of skills we're going to talk about is the tip skill. Tip skill is kind of like an aside or a warning ahead of time. I'm going to elaborate some of these in a little bit more detail, and they're going to be a little out of order of the TIP, but I want to explain the order that the general idea goes in here so you can remember it. So tip skill stands for tipping the temperature of your face with cold water. So just remember, tip the temperature. Intense exercise and paced breathing or progressive muscle relaxation, sometimes called paired muscle relaxation, okay? So your tip the temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and progressive muscle relaxation. So I want to get into a little bit more detail with each of those, but I'm going to go in a little bit of different order than how they're presented because I want to emphasize some of these a little more than others, some of my favorites. Before I get off this slide, let's focus on the I in the middle there, the intense exercise. So the idea here is when you are in that state where that sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, tend and befriend system is activated, what's happening in your body is your heart rate is going up, your blood is literally rushing to your feet and your arms and your face. And the reason it's doing this is it's preparing you to either bolt out of there, just run out of there, punch somebody, have a fight, it is preparing you to get moving. Along with that, you have a surge of adrenaline going through your body, your blood pressure is increasing, your breathing rate is increasing, all of that, okay? That's your sympathetic nervous system activation. We have a competing system in our body that's intended for us to reestablish balance. So we have that part of our body, our part of our nervous system that's ready for the fight, it's ready for that emergent situation. But if we were always in that state, boy, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We'd be really worn out for one thing. So we have this competing system that's there to get us back to a state of balance, back to a state of homeostasis, back to just kind of your normal state of being. And so what it does is it has this opposite or competing response. And it has a response that's in direct proportion to the size of the response of that sympathetic nervous system, okay? However, it may take a while for it to get going, that competing response. Intense exercise can be one of the things that can get it going a bit quicker. So when you feel that urge to run, that urge to move, to do something, there's a lot of things you can do that'll help bring about that competing nervous system response. Intense exercise, go for a run, go for a brisk walk, lift weights really, really intensely, get that heart rate up. Clean your house. That's one of my favorites. I'm like an angry and anxious cleaner. So I will just clean the crud out of everything in my house to work out that energy. Whatever works for you, do that. But work out that energy. Okay. So let's talk about that competing system that it activates for us, that parasympathetic. So the nickname that you can remember for this one is the rest and digest system. So we had the fight, flight, freeze, tend, befriend system, our freak out system. Okay, the rest and digest system is the competing calm down system. So what's happening in that system is our heart rate is lowering, our breathing rate is slowing down, our blood pressure is dropping, our blood is diverted back to our bellies and back to, our central kind of organ systems here. And we begin to be calm. Now, if we've had an especially really big activation of that sympathetic nervous system, we have an equally large activation of the parasympathetic whenever it finally does get activated. So that's why on days when you've been particularly stressed out, you've been maybe crying, you've really, really been having a struggle, then you're exhausted afterward, because here comes that kind of equal response from the parasympathetic to just take you back down. So one of the reasons it's good for us to get in the habit of activating that parasympathetic nervous system sooner is we're interrupting the fight or flight system. We're interrupting the sympathetic nervous system. We're not letting that continue to balloon out and get bigger and bigger and bigger. We're getting that parasympathetic activation happening quicker. We calm down quicker. We don't have such a big response. We're not as worn out. We're not as just kind of knocked out by it. We're regulated a little bit better. So that's the goal with some of these skills that are going to help us get through crisis. Okay, so that was a whole lot for that I, but it's a lot of buildup that's going to help explain some of these other skills that I'm about to talk about, the T and the I in TIP. So, the T and the P, in TIP, because we talked about the I. So let's talk about the P next. Progressive muscle relaxation is one of the things that the P stands for. Also called paired muscle relaxation sometimes. So progressive muscle relaxation, if you've watched my other live streams, you've probably heard about this more than once by now. If you've ever been to therapy with me, you've definitely heard about it. I'm kind of obsessed with this, and there's a good reason for that. It's just amazing. It's like getting a massage. It's like having just a perfect nap. It just helps you unwind, and it just feels so incredible. So I like to share my favorite example of a progressive muscle relaxation video, and that is linked here. If you download the slides, you can just click on the words progressive muscle relaxation and pull it up. You can also just go to YouTube and search for it and find one that you like. YouTube has all kinds of great examples with varieties of different music, some with nature sounds, some not, different people leading it. So you can find somebody whose voice you particularly like, people with different accents, all kinds of stuff. So I highly recommend you either try this little favorite of mine that I often use in therapy with my clients, and frankly use by myself too, just for me, or find one that you like. Progressive muscle relaxation, by the way, is also really great for initiating sleep because of the way it activates that parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest one. And it's also really great for just kind of day-to-day anxiety. I recommend a regular practice of this. The next thing, I wouldn't be surprised if you've already heard of it, but I'm still going to talk about it anyway, just in case you haven't, and that's breathing exercises. So the most common ones, the ones that if you have heard of breathing exercises, you would have heard, these ones most likely, at least some of them, are presented in this graphic here. And this graphic came from a website called destressmonday.org. Okay, so those exercises are belly breathing. So here's how we want to do belly breathing. I'll kind of walk you through doing it. So what you want to do is sit up as straight as you can. Put one hand on your chest, just like over your heart, and one hand just above your belly button. Okay. And you want to breathe as deeply as you can. And as you're doing that, what you're supposed to do is focus on breathing into your diaphragm, into that belly. So you put your hands there to kind of keep track of how deeply you're breathing. And what the goal is to do is to breathe so deeply that when you inhale, it naturally pushes that bottom hand out and that top hand stays relatively still. Okay. So we're not doing shallow breathing that only goes into our lungs. We're doing deep breathing that really goes into our diaphragm. This is something singers do. I would guess probably swimmers, although I've never been like a great swimmer. So let's give it a try. Let's just do a few breaths together. Deep, slow into the belly. Really try and push out that bottom hand by breathing as deeply as you can, in and out. So the idea behind this is to slow us down. And the breath is this really great tool that we have for becoming more mindful, for getting really good at observing, like we talked about before, and just kind of slowing down. And the breath is a powerful tool for getting that parasympathetic nervous system activated. Okay. Some people don't like the belly breathing, and they may try breath counting. So what you do with breath counting is you're going to start with one on the inhale, one on the exhale. Then on your next exhale, you're going to say 1, 2, and increase until you get up to 7. Okay, so let's give that a try. We're going to inhale 1, exhale 1, inhale 1, 2, exhale 1, 2, inhale 1, 2, 3, exhale 1, 2, 3, inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you're anything like me, you may get distracted and lose count if you're counting that in your head. That's fine. Just go back and start again and do it again. Do it as long as you need to until you're able to do that full sequence while in your head saying 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, on the inhale and on the exhale. Another, it's a little simpler. If you don't like all of these kind of gimmicks and hacks, you can also just sit down and just pay attention to your breathing. You don't have to do anything to change it. Just breathe in and breathe out and notice what breathing you're already doing. What's going on there? Take a second and just do that. Don't try to change it in any way. Just Notice it. Listen to your breathing sounds. Notice the rhythm. Okay. And then the last one, breathing visualizations. So you can come up with a positive thing that you want to breathe out, a negative thing that you want to breathe. A positive thing you want to breathe in, a negative thing you want to breathe out. So it kind of depends on the situation that you're in. Let's say you're having a lot of stress about, I don't know, fight with a close friend. So you might breathe in, connection, getting along, happiness, breathe out, anger, disconnection, um, and I don't know, discontent. So whatever it is, choose a couple of words. Breathing in, confidence. Breathing out, anxiety. Breathing in, connectedness. Breathing out, rejection. Breathing in, self-worth. Breathing out, self-rejection. Whatever works for you. Another really good breathing visualization that I absolutely love is if you have an Apple Watch, just using the visualization of as you breathe in, the thing expands, and as you exhale, it contracts. The little kind of circles. You probably know what I'm talking about if you've done the breathing exercise. Every now and then when I'm doing breathing on my own, I actually picture that because I find it really useful the way it kind of goes. For those of you that don't have an Apple Watch, I'm sorry, I'm talking in a very kind of vague way. Maybe you can find a video of it or have a friend who has an Apple Watch show you. Now, I want to address a potential elephant in the room that probably some of you, especially anybody who maybe is prone to panic attacks or anxiety, might already be feeling or thinking. And that is, I hate breathing exercises. I hate thinking about my breath. And part of that is because it makes me more anxious. Well, it turns out some of the time, these breathing exercises work really well for you. And some of the time they won't. And for some people, they rarely work really well. And there is a reason for that. You're not just broken or weird. And it's not just that you have like such severe anxiety that the breathing exercises can't help. It's just because, as it turns out, some of us, myself included, when we get especially anxious and panicky and in that very severe state of crisis, turns out we actually hyperventilate without knowing it. So if you turn out to be one of those people, what can be happening for you is that you're sucking in too much oxygen. Ironically, you might feel like you can't breathe very well, but you're actually kind of gasping for air subconsciously, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic as I just did, but you're taking in too much oxygen. And so if you find that you have a tendency to get more anxious through some of these slowed down breathing, deeper breathing exercises, it might be that you're one of those people and it won't work for you. So let's talk about a different kind of breathing exercise that you can try. And I say, just experiment and see what works best. Go with what works for you. So I like to think of this one as panting like a puppy. So if you have ever seen a dog pant, you don't have to stick your tongue out like they do. Although, I'm not going to judge you if you do that. What I'm talking more about is the way that they breathe so shallow and so rapid. When I watch my dog do it, she's just kind of like really freaking out. Okay. Well, it turns out that's actually a very, very effective breathing strategy if you are a hyperventilator. So if you tend to get more anxious from those other types of breathing exercises, you can try that. You can also think of it doing more like a Lamaze breath. If you have seen kind of the breathing that folks are coached to do when they're giving birth. It's similar. It's rapid. It's shallow. We're not trying to get in the belly. We're not trying to slow it all down. We're not trying to deep breathe. We're trying to breathe rapidly and kind of stop that hyperventilation. So that may work for you. If it doesn't work, that's okay. You don't have to do the breathing exercises. We'll talk about some other things that might. This one is my favorite. And this is part of why I wanted to save it, because it's weird. It's totally weird. It's super easy and it's so incredibly effective. This kind of goes in line with the T in tip skills. So just a quick recap, the T, we talked about tip the temperature on your face with cold water. The I, we talked about intense exercise so that we can try to get that parasympathetic nervous system to finally take over. So we want to really just kind of go with the urges that are going with that sympathetic nervous system activation, intense exercise, workout. The next thing is the P was that progressive or paired muscle relaxation and paced breathing. And now we're finally ready to really dive deeper, so to speak, into the T in tip skills, my very favorite. So we're going to talk about something called the dive response. And this is a piece of why that cold water thing can help, although it's not the only reason why. Okay. So one of the things that happens when we have that sympathetic nervous system reactive or activation, that fight, flight, tendon, befriend, freeze response that I didn't mention, in addition to our heart rate going up, our breathing rate increasing, potential hyperventilation, is blood rushing to our face can lead to our face getting hot. So if you're somebody who, when you panic or get anxious, your face gets hot, you're just like me. and you may get really sweaty, particularly around your face. Some people even get like a little bit of like numbness around their face or around their hands as well with this. So cooling that down with the splashing cold water on your face is one thing. And this dive response hack that I'm going to tell you about can take that even to the next level. Okay, so let's talk about dive response now. Don't know enough foreshadowing. Okay, so if you are swimming in the water and you're about to drown, one of the worst things that you could possibly do is to flail wildly and gasp for air and scream and really freak out. And the reason for that is if you are truly drowning, then you have a limited reserve of oxygen. The more you move, the more that you're going to use up that reserve of oxygen. The more that you kind of breathe rapidly and heavily, the more you're going to use that limited reserve of oxygen. And you need that reserve of oxygen to keep your brain alive, right? So if your brain is deprived of oxygen for too long, you go into brain death and you're gone, essentially, right? So that's why you may have heard, if you've had training as a lifeguard, or you may have even just heard anecdotally if you haven't, that drowning people don't look like we kind of sometimes imagine them to look. They're not flailing, they're not freaking out. They kind of quietly slip under the water. When you're truly about to drown, your body says, okay, we've got to preserve this oxygen, we've got to survive. So we have something called the dive response. The dive response causes us to lower our heart rate, divert blood away from those extremities and toward pretty much the brain and essential organs that are going to keep us alive for a very short period of time. Only what we absolutely must have online in order to survive this. Okay, so it slows us down, drops our heart rate, drops our blood pressure dramatically, and kind of prepares us, instead of for movement, prepares us for holding still. Now, if you've been paying close attention to that other competing nervous system, parasympathetic, our rest and digest system, a lot of that maps on pretty closely to what's going on with our parasympathetic nervous system. So you can use your body's dive response as sort of a hack to get that parasympathetic nervous system activation going. Okay, so just like you can splash that cold water on your face and it's going to cool your face off, or you can take it next level and get that dive response going. So here's what you can do. So if you're in a situation where you actually can do this, this is the best thing you can do. Literally dunk your head underwater, hold your breath for as long as you can, 15 to 30 seconds if you can do that. Okay, just dunk your head under the water. Now, I realize a lot of the times when anxiety hits us, we're not in that kind of situation. So here's some hacks that can make it a little bit, you know, simulate that basically. So go into the bathroom, splash cold water on your face, like the Tea and Tip Skills says. Tip the temperature of your face, but also hold your breath while you're doing that. Splash cold water on your face, cool it off, and hold your breath to activate that dive response. Okay. Side note, this can also interrupt that hyperventilation that you might be doing if you're a hyperventilator. Okay. Another thing you can do, if even that is a little too much, is you can get an ice pack or a Ziploc bag full of ice or a Ziploc bag full of cold water, put it over your eyes and cheeks, and hold your breath. Boom. Let's say you're in class and you can't even do that. Grab something cold near you, like a book or something, and just kind of like rest your face against it. You could look like, you're just kind of thinking for a minute if you need to, and just hold your breath. Can't do any of that? Just hold your breath. Like, do whatever you can to kind of approximate that dive response. I'm telling you, sounds weird, totally one of the weirdest coping skills I teach people, but also one of people's favorites when they give it a try, because it's so easy. It takes so little and it can really calm you down. Now, as you may have noticed on my slide here, there is a little bit of a medical caution that I want to give you. So this dive response, especially if you're doing extremely cold water, can really decrease that heart rate very rapidly. And while that's awesome because it has a calming response, that's really great, there are some things that make that kind of contraindicated. And same goes with the intense exercise, shooting the heart rate up quickly. Okay. You might want to consult with your healthcare provider before trying either of those skills if you have certain conditions like a heart condition, especially like an arrhythmia, for example, and your heart rhythm tends to go really high or really low. A lowered base heart rate due to medications. There are all kinds of medications that can cause a lowered base heart rate. If you take what are called beta blockers, the most common one I know of is called propranolol, and it's commonly prescribed for people with anxiety. It's also prescribed for high blood pressure. So if you take that medication, you just might want to check with your doctor to make sure that it's safe for you to do this before you give it a try. There are also some people who are literally allergic to cold, like break out in hives when they are exposed to extreme cold. So not this dive response thing, the cold water part, not a good thing for you to try in that case. And then finally, if you have an eating disorder, and I don't mean just like any eating disorder, but I mean like if you are, at a stage in your eating disorder that your heart has become affected by extreme weight loss, then you may do some damage here. So you should definitely consult with a medical provider if you're severely underweight or have an eating disorder. Okay. Dive response, my favorite. Okay. Unfortunately, we're going to move away from my favorite coping skill and just talk about another one. And I'm going to spend less time on this, but you can use your 5 senses to do some self-soothing. This little graphic here presents some different ways that you might do some self-soothing. I also just last week did a video for USU's Education Week, and I've linked that video here on the slides, so you can download the slides at tinyurl.com/USUGetThrough. And if you click right here on the slide here, it'll play from the part of that video where I started talking about the self-soothing using the 5 senses, and I talked about grounding. And those are strategies that I use in my office when I'm having somebody having a panic attack. I talk about the strategies that I use right there. So you can go and check that out if you want to. You can also check out the whole video. It's about mindfulness, but I've specifically made it so that if you click from here, it's going to start at the point in the video where I start talking about that. Speaking of what I have people do when they're having a panic attack in my office, I just remembered one more way that can kind of mimic that dive response. It's not 100% getting there, but close, and one that I will often do. And that is get a tall glass of cold water and drink it as fast as you can. So similarly, you're kind of holding your breath, guzzling the water, cooling yourself off, can kind of mimic that dive response. I can't believe I forgot about that one. So that's a good reason to carry a water bottle with you, especially if you're prone to anxiety and panic. All right, so that's it for the short-term crisis survival strategies that I wanted to go through for today. I hope it's been helpful. If you enjoyed this information and you haven't, consider checking out my other live streams that I've done. All previous live streams are available in a Healthy Minds playlist on the College of Education and Human Services YouTube channel. You can see here on the slide, so far I've covered a really great toolkit for self-care. It provides an assessment that can walk you through figuring out some of the areas that your self-care could use improvement. I talked about burnout and compassion fatigue. Really great if you're a teacher, a therapist, a caregiver of any kind, just a person who's kind of like gives a little too much in your life, the friend everybody goes to with their problems. Some really great tools that can help with that. There's also one that I did on improving your sleep, all kinds of very specific concrete strategies that can improve your sleep called sleep hygiene. I did a quick progressive muscle relaxation. I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite because I don't know how to, put fancy music in the background and all of that. But if you want to just kind of dip your toes in, you can try mine, or you can try the better one I linked in this video. I'd honestly recommend that instead. Last week I covered Your Mind Lies to You, and it's talking about the thinking traps that we can get into that make anxiety or depression worse. Common thinking traps that basically everybody gets into sometimes, but when we do them to extremes, then we're more prone to anxiety and depression. That's what I've covered so far. Now, next week, I'll be talking about grief and different ways that can show up, and what does it mean to grieve in a healthy way. After that, the next week, I'll be talking about a really great tool you can use to help yourself stop doing some impulsive behaviors that you just really wish you didn't do. We're going to skip the week of Thanksgiving. And then the first week of December, we're going to be talking about relationships that can make you feel like you're going crazy. So and this can be romantic relationships, but it might also be a relationship with your boss or a friend of yours or your parent or your child. Any relationship where you feel like you're going crazy, you feel like it's not making sense, this person's behavior is not making sense, maybe you're beginning to feel bad about yourself. Those might be signs that you're dealing with an abusive relationship. So I'm going to talk about some of the signs of abusive relationships so you can kind of sort out and decide for yourself, does this sound like maybe I am dealing with some abuse here or not? And maybe get a little clarity on why you feel like you're going crazy because of this relationship. And then finally, the last two, I guess, I forgot looking at the red, I got distracted. Okay, the next one is the balance between us. So this is relationship effectiveness. How do you balance your own needs with the needs of your partner or friend or parent or whoever, and balance the relationship as well? So I'll talk about some skills for that. And then finally, the last one of the semester, I put it in red on this slide because I'm changing that to Thursday instead of Friday. So I'll be streaming on the 16th instead of the 17th of December. And that one is some tools coming from what's called positive psychology. And that's a field of psychology where they have studied, instead of studying what makes us unhappy, what makes us depressed, what makes us anxious, what makes us have PTSD, they've focused on what makes us happy in life. So they've studied people who have higher levels of happiness and looked at and said, what makes them happier? What are the things that they do that others don't? And so I'll talk about some of those skills as well. All right. Thanks for hanging in there. If you've hung in here this long, I really appreciate you joining me and hope this information has been helpful. I would love to get any feedback that you have, positive or negative. I'd also love to get any ideas for future workshops. So if you have questions you'd like to ask me, you have things you'd like me to present on, please feel free to email and let me know. That's Angela, angela.eno, ENNO, at usu.edu. Have a great week, everybody, and I'll see you next Friday.